It's a bit scary seeing a big picture of yourself like that. I think having probably just been introduced as the man who's about to ruin your coffee break, that gets us off to a good start. I will, for this session, try to cut down a little bit on what I do in the session here, but I am available through coffee break then if anyone wants to come and ask me any questions or further information afterwards. But I'll try not to eat into your coffee time too much. This is a key question for me. I work in countries from the UK to Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Estonia, and even a little bit here in Latvia. And a key question for us has been, how do we encourage students to think independently, to develop the skills that they need for the modern world? Not just to learn and retain information, but to become better learners. And that changes the focus in the classroom. It changes the focus of what we're looking for in school. The focus should not be on the teacher. The focus should be on the learner. And often we see classroom observations which come in and look at the teacher and tell the teacher how well they've done in the lesson and make a judgment on the teacher. It's crazy. Because what's really important is facing the other way. What's really important is what's happening in every learner's head. The progress that they're making, the way that they're thinking, and the way that they're developing is far more important. Focus in on the learner, not on the teacher. Teaching seems to have become a strange profession. In fact, it's the only profession I know where 25 people turn up every day to watch you work. And we see it so many times in a classroom. We get to the end of the lesson, and the teacher walks out of the lesson, sweat pouring from their brow. Oh, that was hard work. Oh, get to the staff room, give me coffee, please. The students walk out of the classroom, ready for break, playing on their phone. All the hard work and the effort should be done by the students, not the teacher. And that's about providing opportunities. This is great. We're at a conference about technology, and I've got something that looks like it's from the original series of Star Trek to change my slides. When we want to put the learning first, create for the students a language to talk about learning. Focus not on what they're being taught, but what they're learning, and create a language to do so. I heard a great story recently about a man who taught his dog to whistle. He said, "I have spent 3 months teaching my dog to whistle." And his friend said, "Really? Wow, can I hear it?" So he said, "Dog, whistle." And the dog said, "Woof." He said, "I thought you said you taught it to whistle." He said, "I did. I didn't say he'd learnt to whistle." So students need that time to think about their learning. What have they learnt from the experience that they've been in the classroom? Time to share their thinking and talk about learning. What can I do now that I couldn't do before? What do I know now that I didn't know before? So they focus in on the learning skills that they're developing. And to encourage that independent thinking, students need opportunity to be challenged. In that modern world, if we want to prepare students for independent thinking, to be independent, they need to develop resilience. Resilience to challenge. When faced with a challenge, do you give up Or do you try again? And more students are learning to give up. Part of being in the classroom and part of learning, part of that effort is giving students opportunity to be and to feel challenged. You might have noticed recently the Olympics have been on in Rio. I'm going to set you a challenge. I'm going to ask you to talk to the person next to you. Just take 1 minute to talk to the person next to you about Olympic athletes. What do you think? Are you born with the skills to be an Olympic athlete, or is it something you develop? Take 1 minute to talk to the person next to you. Olympic athletes, born or developed? Okay, if I can interrupt you there. Thank you. I know that doesn't give you long to talk about an age-old discussion, but it's a challenge. It's something that we think about in terms of what we present and provide for our students. We talked about opportunities for challenge. What we believe about learning, what we believe about whether we're born with skills or whether we develop those skills, what we believe about that changes the way we behave. My beliefs about learning impact on my potential to learn and the potential for other people that I'm working with to learn. What I believe about learning impacts on the opportunities I give my students. Our beliefs about that change the way we think about learning and change the way we think about the feedback that we give and that we want to receive. I'm going to talk about the way that elephants are trained now. It's an important thing. When an elephant is trained, it starts from when it's very small. The baby elephant has a rope tied around its back leg, and the rope is put into a peg in the ground. When the elephant walks, the rope pulls, and when it gets to the end, the elephant feels a tug on its leg and stops. It tries to move, but it can't. So it goes back. As the elephant gets older, the rope gets thicker, and the peg in the ground gets bigger. The elephant can still walk, but when it reaches the end of the rope, it feels a pull on its leg, and it stops. And it goes back. As the elephant becomes an adult, the rope is replaced with a chain. There is a chain around the leg which is attached to a stake in the ground. When the elephant walks, it feels a tug on the chain, and it stops and goes backwards. An adult elephant could easily just pull the chain, pull the peg out of the ground, and be free. But it doesn't. When it feels the tug on its leg, it stops and goes back. Because it's learnt throughout its life that when you feel that tug on your leg, you can't go any further. You have to stop. And learning can be like that. We put limits on what's possible for us to achieve, like chains on the leg. How many of you have ever said, "I can't draw"? A few honest people there, yeah. How many have said, "I can't use a computer"? How many have said, I'm terrible at maths? I hope that's not all the maths teachers putting their hands up there. We limit our potential by thinking it's not possible to do that. But we do the same for our students. I was sitting in a parent-teacher consultation meeting a few years ago. The child was there, their parent was there, and I was giving them some feedback on their English work. And I said, he's not really doing as well as he could. If he tried really hard and put in lots of effort, he could do much better. And the dad turned to his son and said, don't worry, son, I was terrible at English as well. What message is that giving the boy? The message he's getting is that if you're not very good at this, don't worry, give up. It's okay to be bad at this. But actually what we want to encourage is the attitude of effort, hard work, determination, resilience. This model, for me, underpins the approach to learning that we're talking about when we think about becoming more independent as learners. It's called the ASK model, which stands for Attitudes, Skills, and Knowledge. In any learning situation that we're in, we bring with us a set of attitudes, skills, and knowledge. We all have them. Attitudes like being resilient, being independent, being open-minded or confident, how anxious we feel. These are all dispositions, characteristics that make up our learning abilities. We also bring with us some skills. Skills that we can employ to help us to solve problems, to reason, to manage ourselves and our learning. Of course, there's always knowledge too, facts and information that we pick up. And those impact on our ability to learn. You can see in this model we have a triangle in the center that shows that they're all connected. If you arrived here today thinking, oh, fantastic, I'm going to find out a load of new stuff today, you come in open-minded, confident, ready, willing, able to take in new knowledge and information. If you arrive today thinking, oh, I'm a bit worried about the English speaking, I'm not sure about this, I think it's going to be quite hard today, I don't really want to be here, I'd rather still be on holiday, it's going to be harder to take in the new skills and knowledge. I had a school that I worked in a few years ago now. I had a colleague, and the two of us, we had to go every week to a staff meeting. I quite like staff meetings. I know it's a bit sad, really, but I quite like staff meetings. I think when I go to a staff meeting, it's an opportunity to talk to my colleagues about what we've been doing, what we've learned, and what we can do differently. It's an opportunity, if there's a visitor in, to pick up some new ideas that I can steal and use with the students in my classroom. So I arrive at the staff meeting thinking, fantastic, opportunity to learn. And I sit down near the front and I've got my paper ready and I'm there ready to take down new ideas and to steal things and go away. My colleague, very good friend of mine, but she becomes Dragon Lady during staff meetings. I don't know what happens to her, but she comes in and she takes the seat closest to the door. Every staff meeting, she sits down next to the door. Whatever time of year it is, she keeps her coat on, even when the sun's shining. And she sits with her arms folded like this. And her only contribution to the staff meeting is to go every few minutes. When you think about those attitudes and skills coming into the staff meeting, which of us is most likely to learn more? Who's ready to take in new knowledge and information? Who's ready to take something away with them? And of course, that's the same for our students. If we picture two students, student one wakes up in the morning. There, in his room on the chair, are his clothes, all nicely washed, ironed, ready to put on. So when he comes downstairs for breakfast, there's Mum and Dad. Cereal's ready. Have a bowl of cereal, son, it's fine. Oh, you've got sports today, so I've packed your bag. It's next to the front door. The bus is coming, you'd better go, son. Have a lovely day, love you, bye. And off he goes to school. Just like my house in the morning, that is, peaceful and calm. Student 2 wakes up. Student 2 puts on the same clothes he was wearing yesterday. He comes downstairs and there's nothing for breakfast. Mum's still asleep. So he goes in Mum's purse and he takes some money out so that on the way to school, he can call in at the shop and buy a can of Coke and a Mars bar. He shares that with his brother. He drops his little brother off at school and he carries on to his school. He arrives late. He gets scowled at for being late. And he walks into his classroom late. And he sits down next to student 1. Which of those two students is ready to take in new knowledge and information? Which is ready and primed for learning? Which is ready to get that knowledge, facts, take the test, answer the questions that happen in a classroom? And it's quite obvious that the attitudes and skills that the students have can prepare them for one type of learning, taking in that knowledge corner. What we tend to do in teaching is we tend to start with that knowledge corner. We tend to plan for that one. We plan for that knowledge corner and we make sure this is what I'm going to teach the students through the lesson. We then think, well, what I'll do now is I'll put the students into groups so that they can talk to each other and share some ideas or work together on the problem, so that they'll develop their social skills. And then that last corner, the attitudes, we can say, well, if they're talking to their friends and working together, it'll make them more confident. What we tend to do is we plan for knowledge. We organize around skills, and if we're honest, we probably hope for the best with the attitudes. That's not a criticism. There's a good reason why we do that. The reason we do that is that we have all the language that we need to teach knowledge. The language is there in our textbooks, it's there in videos that we watch, it's there in our test papers and our exams, it's there in everything that we do. If I was to teach you about the Battle of Hastings in 1066, I can then ask you, when was the Battle of Hastings? And you know it, 1066. The language is all there. The language to talk about skills is a little bit harder. And we have very little language to talk about attitudes. In fact, I know from when I work in schools that when I get the student reports at the end of the year, our student reports go out with a comment and a target. In the comment, it says the student has done quite well this year. They've done okay in their subject. But time and again, I read the same target in the reports for the students. The target that I read over and over again said things like, if they improve their attitude, they will do better in this subject. With a better attitude, he could do well in school. And the more I read it, the more I started to think, what do we mean? What do we mean by attitudes? Student 2, is he going to wake up the morning after reading his report and think, I need to improve my attitude, so today I will feel more confident, more ready for learning, more open-minded and more resilient? It doesn't work like that. In the same way that we wouldn't write, if he had more knowledge, he would do better. We specify it. So it's the same with attitudes, because that central triangle, it suggests that there's a connection between them, but it also suggests that we can develop in each of those three areas. We can get better and make progress in attitudes, skills, and knowledge. What we come in with impacts on our potential to learn, but we can get better at all three. We can become more confident. We can become more resilient. What I need to become more resilient is more opportunities to be challenged. If I set my same class of students a problem-solving task, you're going to work together and solve a problem. It's going to be hard to do. You will make mistakes and you'll need to try again. When you make another mistake, try again. Don't give up. Keep trying. Which of those two students, student 1 or student 2, is more ready to face challenge? Which has developed strategies to be resilient? Which of our two students has faced problems, learnt strategies to deal with it, and bounced back? Which of our students is willing to try and try again? And suddenly student 2 seems more ready for learning. Student 1, who is quite used to getting the right answer, when was the Battle of Hastings? 1066. Well done. He's quite used to being top of the class, to being the bright boy. If you set him a challenge and he gives you an answer and you say, but what about this? Whoa, hang on, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he thinks that by being asked another question, he's wrong. If we want to develop a set of attitudes towards learning, towards being independent, students need the opportunity to try, to make mistakes, and to try again. Students need opportunities to talk about their learning, develop a language to talk about that learning, and think of strategies that help them become more independent. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to talk to the person next to you again. Can you make some connections between the Ask model and the teaching and learning in your classrooms? Just give you 30 seconds to make some links. Okay, if I can interrupt you there, please. I'm going to ask you a question now. See how well you do with this question. If you can do well with this question, you will deserve a coffee. Here's my question. I said that developing attitudes and skills, as well as knowledge, is about developing a language to talk about learning. So I'm going into the skills corner, and we're going to talk about thinking skills. I'm just going to give you 1 minute, that's all. 1 minute with the person next to you to come up with 5 types of thinking you've used since the start of the day. Share some ideas, write them down. 5 types of thinking you've used since the start of the day. I've put one example on there, comparing. You can't have that one, that's mine. You need to think of 5 of your own. You've got 1 minute with the person next to you to write down 5. Okay, I'm going to stop you there, please. Now, I know I didn't give you very long, but I asked you to think of 5 types of thinking that you have used since the start of the day. What I'd like to know first, I'm not going to ask you to shout them out, but just put your hand up. Put your hand up if you found that question difficult to answer. So be honest, we're amongst friends. Put your hand up if you found that difficult to answer. There's a lot of hands going up around the room. You can, with the translation, you can tell there as the hands go up when you get the translation. It was like a Mexican wave. What made that quite difficult to do was not because I've asked it in English, you're doing it in Latvian, not because you weren't prepared, not even because you're desperate for coffee. What made that difficult to do was that we haven't practiced the language to answer it yet. And this is what's important about the language for learning in students, that if we want them to become better thinkers and reflect on learning, they need a language to be able to do it. When you have the words, it's much easier. And it was great for me watching you doing that, because I could see most of you going, oh, it's tough, yeah, okay. There's one, oh, we did well there, and another one, oh, good, good, good. Can't think of another one. Should we put that? Yes, put that. He's not going to check, is he? We'll just write anything, actually. It'll be all right. When we have the words we need to talk about it, and there are many words to talk about thinking and learning, when we have the words, it's much easier to reflect on the learning that we're doing. And we use these words all the time. We're just not aware of it. We're not aware that we're thinking. Encouraging students to think about their own thinking and their own learning encourages them to learn further. And language is the key to that. When students start out in life as little babies, some of them will get lots of stimulation. Colours, noises, bells. Some will be encouraged to read. There will be opportunities to look through books with their parents or to read for themselves. They will have opportunities to develop their passions and to try out new things. Whereas some students will have traumatic experiences. Things that scar them for a long time. Some children will even be born into poverty. They won't have opportunities to develop all of those things. But for whatever the reason, when students start school in the UK at around 5 years old, some of them will come into school with around 6,000 words in their vocabulary. Others will come into school with just 500 words in their vocabulary. When you look at the impact of that on the progress that students make, some students, the ones with 6,000 words, 97% of them will pass. at age 11 their national tests. Only 73% of those with 500 words will pass. I was quite surprised about that, because it's not as big a difference as I thought it might be. But what surprised me even more is going forward to age 16 when students take their exams and their tests. Those students who started school with 6,000 words, 75% of them will pass. Only 21% of those who started with 500 words will pass. Language is the key to accessing learning, a language to talk about and opportunities to talk about their learning. When we give students access to that language, a language of learning and a language for learning, they are more likely to succeed. So I want to leave you with this thought. How often does our teaching get in the way of their learning? When we think about language in the classroom, and I've watched hundreds of classrooms, who's the one in the classroom who practices the most language? It's usually the teacher. If we focus in this way, we should be able to hear, we should see the opportunities that students have to talk about and think about their learning. This was first said to me a few years ago, and I didn't understand it. When I thought about it, I realized what I was doing in my classrooms. Have you had that situation where two students are struggling on with something at the front of the classroom? And, oh, I can't do this, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know where I am here. What I tend to do as a teacher is I swoop in with my Superman cape on, and I say, what's the trouble here? And they tell me what's wrong, and I say, well, just do this, and this, and this, and it's done. There you go. And I fly off to find another student to help. But actually what I've done as a teacher is I stopped them from thinking, I stopped them from talking, I stopped them from trying to work it out, and I told them the answer. What I've taught them is that the next time you're struggling, the next time you have a challenge, give up. Put your hand up, and I'll do it for you. Learning is about opportunity for challenge, time for reflection, and a language for learning. I'm sorry that today is overrun and taken into your coffee break, but thank you very much for your patience and for listening.